So the exhibition is called The Collector's Garden, and it is about collecting. And how I got to this idea was my interest in figurative sculpture, or again sculpture that depicts human being and its relationship with the spectator, how it interacts with the viewer and how it interacts with in the space. Because I have noticed that people always react to figures somehow, or they have these ideas, and that not maybe always, but very often they are interested in a figure and they have feelings to this, and they project their own ideas to the figure, because of course a sculpture itself is a lifeless object. And then I started thinking about how the object relates with the spectator, or how it works together with her, and I realized it can be very irritating, the thing that the sculpture is lifeless and it won't respond to the viewer in any way. It's just in the space. It's like sharing the space with something that is in your form, that looks and somehow feels like human, but it's not human. And I started thinking about this, how to approach this, and actually, as a maker of sculptures, or after making these sculptures, I realized I actually had this quite strong relationship with them. They're somehow, they're not alive, but you have a relationship with this object. And then I started thinking about, like, it's very human that people want to somehow possess things that they can't really approach. And then I came to the concept of collecting, because through history these sculptures have been very powerful objects in terms of the collectors who have wanted to own them or to possess them. And in history, like during the Renaissance times, for example, like kings and popes were really competing in order to get certain sculptures, like antique statues, to their collection. And then I read about this way of displaying these sculptures in collections, and how they looked and how they started interacting. And then I thought about collecting and how these objects start relating, or how they start functioning in one space in a physical art collection, for example. So I came across, why I call this exhibition The Collector's Garden, is that I came across with this engraving from the 16th century, and I think it was Marten van Heemskerk, I can be wrong, but it was his engraving, and it was called the Garden of Kasakalli, and there were these objects together in a yard. Like I remember there was Michelangelo's Bacchus in the front, and there were other objects in the background, very poorly drawn, but it gave me this very powerful experience of sculpture, although it existed on the engraving, and I really liked how it all functioned. And then I thought I would make my own garden, or this kind of collection of sculptures that I have admired, or use them as starting points, or use the stories of these sculptures as starting points. I am, I guess, the type of artist who always has an idea, and then I choose the material based on this idea. So, for instance, this golden snake woman here, or the Cleopatra, as I call the sculpture, it is golden because of all these influences that I have from the things I see and the things I read, like for instance, the 1960s movie Cleopatra, where there was a lot of gold in the setting, and I don't know, Beyonce's outfit from Grammy Awards when she was expecting her twins, and then I was thinking how to put it into material, how these ideas materialize, and then I chose the material based on the idea. Lately I have been working combining sculpture with photography, but the main interest that I have had now is this figurative sculpture and figures. And I was thinking about this idea of a figure, or how the figure actually influences us and how it's actually materializing. So when I talk about this medium that I have used here, or this how to say, technique, combining sculpture with photography, which is seen here in this exhibition, then I can say that I started to think about the idea of like a figure or a figurative object, which in itself is a very time-consuming thing, which means that our sculptors use a lot of time in order to make something. Normally this, at least in historical terms, the figure is made based on a model. And when going back to these old classics, then for instance like Michelangelo again, or Rodin made one figure a couple of years. And I thought about it, and I find it very interesting, because you really get to know the subject. You meet the model many times, and you probably get something that also is more than this model. There is this certain aura around each person, and then you get maybe to the core of the subject also, in a way, when you're portraying a person. And then I thought about like photography or photographs, which is in a way is like a contrast. It's a contrasting medium because it only captures one moment, and this moment never returns. So I thought it would be exciting to somehow combine these two. As a child, I thought when it has to be art, then it definitely has to be sculpture, and it probably came from these art history books that I had at home. We had like these kind of Soviet history books, so it was a little bit like art history books, so the choice was a little bit limited. But then I remember this one book of Michelangelo, and I guess then I developed this interest in sculpture, and I like about this this freedom that this area gives you, or this medium gives you. You can do basically anything when you're a sculptor. Yeah.